Kaiju, the Japanese term translating to strange beast, is both a term describing giant monsters as well as the name of the entertainment genre that has frightened international audiences since its debut in the 1950s, when Godzilla made his big screen introduction, tapping into our primal fears. Since then, the giant monster genre has spawned dozens of sequels, reboots, original properties, knockoffs, and an endless rogues gallery of massive monsters to pit against one another. Most of them are enemies, but many are misunderstood defenders of the universe. The one thing they all have in common is that they're weird, imaginative, and captivating. And now, the great pop culture debate wants to determine what is the best kaiju. Like Mothra, I am also summoned by a pair of tiny twins, specifically the Olsen twins whenever someone plays a VHS copy of When the West Was Fun. I just can't resist! I'm your host, Eric Resniak. Please help me welcome my panel for this episode, who will be battling it out for the very fate of the planet, or for modest internet fame, whatever. Much like Godzilla, he's ancient, he's pissed, and his personality is radioactive. It's Bob Erlenbach.
Eric, thank God our audience can't see me because my dubbing is way off.
Another reason to never underestimate the importance of body language. Thanks, Ursula. Our next panelist is just like a kaiju attack, and by that we mean most people run and scream when they see him. Please welcome back to the podcast, Zach Derby.
Eric, it's like you studied my life growing up. It's scary, but I feel honored.
Well, is that the Empire State Building in your pocket, or are you just happy to see me? And finally, Oxygen Destroyer. I hardly know her. It's Eric Klein.
Yes, Godzilla.
And it's a very special welcome to Eric, who is one of our top-tier Patreon supporters of the podcast, and who is sponsoring this episode, so we are just delighted to have you, Eric. And please feel free to destroy the elaborate city we have made out of cardboard as you throw your tantrums throughout this episode.
Thank you all for having me. Oh, sorry.
We're delighted. No, you're good. So before we get to the debate, how does this work? Although this is a mini-sode, we did have a public poll in which we invited kaiju fans to select their favorite giant monsters. We tallied up those votes, the top 16 vote-getters were added to a bracket, and now we argue about it and insult each other, all for your amusement. Want to play along at home? You can. Head to greatpopculturedebate.com and go to polls and brackets. There you'll find the downloadable listener brackets for this and every episode of our little show. Do your picks match up with ours? Do you think we need to go back to hibernating at the bottom of the ocean for a few more centuries until our taste improves? Let us know by dropping a comment on this episode at our website or by yelling at us on Twitter, Instagram, or Mastodon. Also, as a heads up, throughout this episode, you may hear some strange noises as we have been alerted by the International Collective of Scientists that we may be, in fact, under kaiju attack as we record this.
Camera is really me. Camera is filled with me. We've been eating camera.
It's going to be a wild one, folks. So before we get into the top 16, I would like to give our panelists a chance to talk about the kaiju they were bummed did not make the discussion. Bob, why don't you start first?
Okay, so for me, one of the kaiju that didn't make the bracket was a Gyaos from the Gamera series, which he is a big opponent in several of the Gamera movies, including back in the 60s as well as in the 90s with the reboot films. It was in both the first and the third movie from that. And I was just really surprised that it didn't make the bracket. It got pretty close, I think, when I think back on the votes and from the poll from this, but it's really next to Gamera. He's probably the most recognizable creature from that series, and I just really like that creature quite a bit. Gyaos is really kind of like I don't want to say pterodactyl. He's more of like what are those? Not dragons. Those things from Final Fantasy. Those winged beasts. I can't think of what they're called, but he's kind of like that. But then the other one that I was surprised didn't make, I wasn't surprised didn't make it because people probably don't think of him as a kaiju, was Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. I mean, he's a giant creature and he attacks cities. So I'm going to qualify him in that category. But, you know, he's a sailor. He's in the city. Let's get him laid and we'll be fine. So...
You know, as I record this, it's Fleet Week in New York City. And so I always welcome the seamen into my home, Stay Puffed or not. So that being said, Eric, why don't you talk? You are a diehard kaiju fanatic. A, do you consider Stay Puffed to be a kaiju? And B, what were some of the ones that you were surprised did not make it?
I would count him, definitely, yeah. In terms of ones that surprise me, there's Abira, the giant lobster. Because he's a giant lobster, how could you not love that and vote for that? And less surprised, but want to shout out the graboids from Tremors. When I was like thinking about monsters for the episodes, I was like, oh, are they like big enough, and like kind of thinking of like, when do we count the sort of non-classic Japanese monsters? But I do love Tremors, so I want to shout those out.
Yeah,
I didn't even think about adding those to the poll when we pulled this episode. I didn't even think about adding those, and that's a really great one to bring in. Sorry, Eric, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
It's
no,
okay.
You're fine. I had two clarifying questions for and this is going to get confusing, folks. There's two Erics. I said jokingly when we began, by top model rules, one of us would have to have a fake name. I'm not going to do that to Eric because he's the sponsor of this episode. So maybe it needs to be me that has a fake name. I'll workshop that as we go along. But I have two clarifying questions for Eric. Number one, did the giant lobster also come with giant Cheddar Bay biscuits?
No.
See, I think that's why he missed the bracket. And then number two, I would consider the graboids to be kaiju, specifically because they fucked with Reba McEntire. And like, she's a national treasure. So we need to protect her at all costs. So excellent suggestions there. Anything else from you, Eric?
No, thank you.
You got it. Zach, what about yours?
So for me, a couple came to mind because kaiju is, it gets used in a lot of different ways. But one from my childhood, of course, is the Dragon Zord. I grew up a big fan of Godzilla. The Dragon Zord was very reminiscent of Mecha Godzilla, and Godzilla shows up originally evil, given all the Rangers a run for their money. It kicks the crap out of the Megazord, and eventually Tommy becomes good. But, you could summon that thing with a little stabby sword. That was amazing. And sometimes he'd control it from the outside. Sometimes he'd control it from the inside. And it seemed to have a mind of its own. And it lived in the water. Come on, that's a kaiju right there.
That's
the other
kaiju.
one, people may not think as a kaiju. But if you're a fan of Star Trek, way back in the day during the animated series, there was a clone of Spock that was Spock 2. And he was about 25 feet tall. And although at the end of the Infinite Vulcan episode, he was a good guy, I don't want to think of what it was like when Pon farr would come around once a year, because that guy may do some damage to a city or two.
Absolutely. And, a 25-foot high Vulcan mind meld. Forget about two and the pink one and the stink. It's over. And by the way, you can absolutely swear on this podcast, Zach. You feel free.
I can't remember, so I self-edit myself. But I will let it fly going on.
You got it. Thank you. Great ideas. I will say for me, I agree with you about the Power Rangers. That was one of the ones that for me, I consider the Power Rangers villains especially. They're highly influenced by kaiju, if nothing else. Eric, again, kaiju expert, do you consider the Power Rangers villains to be kaiju?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so like I had Goldar on my particular list. The ones that I think are definitively kaiju, and none of them made it, were anything from Pacific Rim, which really bummed me out because I think at least the first movie's terrific and had some really threatening kaijus in it, specifically Otachi and Knifehead. I thought the designs were great. I thought the concept of the whole thing was super cool, and I thought the whole thing was badass. Then I would also say from a comic perspective, and I understand it gets a little weird with comics because it's comics, but Fin Fang Foom from Marvel absolutely qualifies as a kaiju to me, and he's a delight. He's running around there in his little purple spandex shorts, very fashionable, but he's been around since the 1960s wreaking havoc. So those were my particular picks. With that being said, let's duck and cover because the kaiju are invading and the debates are underway. That was a crowd running in terror. I can understand how it might not have been clear when you heard that. So first up, it was a unanimous victory for Big Daddy Kaiju Godzilla, who dethroned Ultraman antagonist Red King, meaning that Godzilla will stomp right into round two. But first, Bob did want to say something on behalf of Red King. Bob?
Yeah, I just wanted to call out, it was the only Ultraman monster that made it onto this list. And when I was doing research for this, as well as when we had our poll posted for this episode, I think some folks would even argue that Ultraman and the creatures from Ultraman maybe don't always qualify or shouldn't. Ultraman does fall more in line with the Power Rangers kind of Sentai sort of approach to these to the monsters and things like that. So I was just surprised that it was the only one. There was several Ultraman on the bracket. So I was surprised that he was the only one, but I was glad that at least one did, because I think it kind of diversified our conversation here today for sure. But I was able to look up and watch some of the Ultraman episodes in preparation for this, especially knowing that Red King was on the list. And it's a lot of fun. It's from the 60s. It couldn't be more 60s of a series than you could imagine. And it's just a lot of fun. I would encourage folks to seek it out. I think I saw it on Tubi was where I was watching it. So it's out there for you, but it's more, I just thought it was worth shouting out because it was the only one on the list. So,
and I think Ultraman continues to be popular, right? I know he
very
was
much
at
so.
least through the 90s and 2000s. I'm not sure now.
Yeah, there's continuously series as well as movies, and I think that even in comics, in lots of different media, he still pops up. He's incredibly popular, certainly probably more so in Japan than here, but there's certainly a pretty big online community for Ultraman as well. So.
Great. Awesome. Thank you for that. Next, the panel is evenly split between pollution alien Hedorah and benevolent giant robot Jet Jaguar. Eric, why don't you explain why a toxic guy like Hedorah has you slipping under with a taste of his poison paradise? That was a badly delivered Britney Spears lyric, but you got where I was going. Bob, say domo arigato, Mr. Roboto, and try to program Jet Jaguar into round 2. I'm going to have Bob go first.
Sure. An interesting pair up because, and Eric, our guest, can also correct me if I get any of these factoids wrong, because you're probably going to be a little bit more in tune to it than me. But an interesting pair up because I think they both only had single feature film appearances for each of them. So it's a pretty good pairing with regards to that piece to it. But I just really picked Jet Jaguar because he's unlike really anyone else on this list. It is a robot, humanoid robot, which maybe there's folks that would argue that wouldn't fall into the category of a quote unquote strange beast. So maybe people would argue that he doesn't. But, I think that because he's so unique and different, he first appeared in 1973 in the movie Godzilla versus Megalon, excuse me. And I think because he's just so different from the rest, I think he has an opportunity here to just be called out and be repped for. His design was created from a contest for children, which I find particularly interesting. He's really cool. It's a real sharp character design. I feel maybe they were trying to capture some kind of the Ultraman vibe because he is reminiscent of the Ultraman character. But like I said, I think he's got superhuman strength, the ability to fly. He can grow in size. I mean, same. He's seen as an ally to Godzilla. He helps him defend, when Godzilla is defending and not destroying, so to speak. I don't know. I just thought that he was pretty cool. And when it comes to Hedorah, and I'll obviously Eric will speak to him and them, excuse me, and defend them, but from a character design perspective, I don't really care for Hedorah all that much. It's kind of messy, kind of all over the place. I get it. It's like a blobby pollution monster, but just from a total aesthetic and character design, I think Jet Jaguar just outclasses and is a little bit more cool and cool to look at and more fun. So.
All right. Thank you. Eric, what have you got for Hedorah?
So I love Hedorah. One of my favorites on this list, easily. The thing about Hedorah for me is that he's one of those monsters where, there's something really strong going on thematically. Because, everyone loves just, a nice little monster design. But something that, helps different characters stand out is just, when there's something with what is the monstrosity saying, Godzilla atomic bombs, as much as we love just a flailing guy in a lizard suit, there's also that sort of impact behind it. And Hedorah delivers that for me in a way that a lot of the other characters don't, where even though that movie is so old now, it feels as relevant, if not more so now. Just watching just all the pollution, all those wide shots of just just trash in the ocean, all of that. Hedorah is very much just here's the monster that basically, humanity makes. He's also very silly. He has those multiple forms, which is always nice. We love a multiple look sort of thing. And when he just sort of starts flying around like a UFO, he looks so fucking stupid, but it's really fun. It's really silly. he has those bulging, like, red evil eyes that just, like, anytime he's just looking at the camera, it's just very funny. He's, like, simultaneously, like, really serious thematically, but also just a joy to look at. So it just kind of gives you the best of both worlds for me. And he just says monster to me more than Jet Jaguar does, because it's like, oh, that's clearly a monster, versus the other is, like Bob said, visually is kind of more robot.
Yeah, I have one word for Hedorah, Visine. It'll get the red out. And you were talking about all the shots of the trash in the ocean. I didn't realize they'd followed my family on summer vacation, but you know, there we go. It's a documentary film. Excellent argument, Eric. Zach, where are you on this one?
I'm really torn. I like Jet Jaguar just as its own individual entity. You're right. It's not a monster, but it did have a special place in my heart from being a kid. Hedorah is a very unique monster. I think I just have this long-standing hatred of it because I was always teased of the flying ability and Sprite in Godzilla King of the Monsters NES, and it never showed up, and therefore I still have hatred for him. It's biased and it's not right, but I still have it for some reason.
Is it Hedorah or Hedorah? Because I am known for mispronouncing all the time. My nibbling Braden called me out in the Pokemon episode for repeatedly mispronouncing Pokemon. Is it Hedorah or Hedorah?
I've said and heard it both, but Eric number 2, I defer to you. You are the expert.
I'm really not an expert. I'm just a nerd. I've heard it both ways too. If there's like a more proper way, I'm not sure.
Well, I encourage you to drag me if I mispronounce any of the monsters in this episode, and I am sure I will.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah, great. I don't know how I initially voted on this, but my argument, I think the argument that Hedorah / heterosexual lifestyle, it is an actual monster, right? And Jet Jaguar is more of a robot. And if I can throw back to our car episode, if Optimus Prime being a robot does not make him a car, then Hedorah / Hedorah being a robot does not make him a monster. And I'm 100% doing this to get back at Bob. So I'm throwing my vote to Hedorah, and I believe that's 3-1, correct? Or are you sticking with Jet Jaguar here, Zach?
Yeah, with the logic, I will go along with Hedorah. The smog monster is a monster, so I will concede. I agree with Bob, and I still love Jet Jaguar, but I will concede and go along with Hedorah.
All right, Bob, you're going to say something?
I'll go ahead and switch over to Hedorah as well, because I certainly rep for Jet Jaguar. He's super cool, but I think Eric touched on something really important as it pertains to all of these films, is that these monsters say something. There's a message. These movies have a message, as goofy and as silly as they can get, and maybe not all of them have a message, but their origin, their genesis, everything of what they were from the very beginning is a commentary on what is happening in society, what is happening in the world, what is just happening in general, whether it be nuclear pollution, whatever the case might be. So Hedorah really is more representative of the genre as a whole, so I'm willing to go ahead and switch over.
All right. It's a clean sweep for Hedorah / Hedorah / Hedwig and the Angry Inch. Next, 3/4 of the panel is ready to demolish New York City with American Kaiju the Cloverfield Monster, but Zach thinks 3 is a magic number and is pushing for longtime Godzilla foil Ghidorah. Zach, explain why Ghidorah remains your king. I will explain why I would pick Cloverfield over and over. Zach, you can go first.
All right, thank you. So there have been a few monsters that have fought Godzilla over and over again. But really, there's only one that gives him a run for his money every time that he cannot beat without help, except for one movie, and it is Ghidorah. He's been many names: Ghidorah, King Ghidorah, Astro Monster, and Godzilla cannot beat really any form if he is the main antagonist. And he's deadly with his flying ability. He's got the gravity beams. whether it's 1 or 3 monsters, it's practically unbeatable. The only way Godzilla could beat Ghidorah was in GMK when Godzilla was the antagonist. And, now we're going to use Ghidorah as a hero. And it reverses how all the characters are playing against each other. That's the only reason Godzilla was able to pretty much one-shot him. Any other time, I forget how many films Ghidorah showed up in, but I believe it's more than any other kaiju that Godzilla has ever fought over his history.
He's got a great design too. Let's just say that. And I will be very open. I am so swayable on all of my picks for this episode. This is, I have an awareness on kaiju, but I am definitely by no means an expert. And you can tell me that I am an ignorant slut, and you would be right. So I'm very open to flipping here. But let me talk a little bit about Cloverfield, which is actually not the name of the monster. Cloverfield is the name of the military operation given to the monster's landing. Apparently, the people behind the scenes just refer to the monster as Clover. Clover may lose points for barely appearing in the eponymous movies. In the shots that we do get of it in Cloverfield, we never get a full sense of the beast. While that was entirely the point of the movie, which was a found footage entry in the kaiju art form, it makes it an outlier in this group, and that's why I call Clover the elusive chanteuse, much like Mariah Carey. What makes Cloverfield work as a movie or fail, depending on your point of view, is that based on the original film, the viewer has no idea where it came from as it rampages through what is very much the real world. But the filmmakers have confirmed subsequently that the monster that destroys New York City is in fact a newborn that was separated from its parents and its own home dimension, and is not wantonly destroying civilization out of rage, but out of fear, sadness, and confusion. When I feel like that, I destroy a carton of Ben & Jerry's, so I can't really blame the monster here. I like the amount of thought that went into the design of Clover. One of the elements that I thought was the most interesting is that it's covered in lice, which are basically human-sized. And as it thrashed around New York City, the lice fell off and then started killing people and apparently replicating in them. If you remember that absolutely terrifying subway scene from the original movie, they discover one of the girls was bitten by one of these things, and they all freak out as she then explodes, and presumably a smaller louse emerges from her. Total nightmare fuel. Like 20 years later, I still think about that scene, and it freaks me out. So I like Clover in that it's original, it's fairly modern, it's American, but I understand it's up against Ghidorah, who is a landmark kaiju and has been around for decades, and arguably is a more pure reflection of the art form. I'm going to throw it to Bob. Where are you on this one?
Yeah, I'm definitely, I loved Cloverfield when it came out. I think that it's probably a very split crowd with people who like or dislike that movie. And it was a really cool and inventive. It was a found footage type of film. Overall, that whole phenomenon of that movie was super cool. You're right, Eric. The creature's barely in the movie, right? And it does have some unique and fun things, and the design is great, but there's just a classic King Ghidorah, whatever you want to refer to them as, so classic. The three-headed dragon kaiju, from a character design, a creature design, it's just so cool to look at from when it started in the original films to the evolution of as they continue to refine it and make it bigger and better as it continued to grow throughout the films. It's just so much fun and so cool. And it is the creature, one of the creatures that continues to come back, to Zach's point. It's just so classic and so epic and so cool to look at. I can't turn my back on it now. I will be going with Ghidorah.
Ooh, okay. Eric, where are you on this one?
So this is definitely one of the tighter competitions in round one, I think. But I'm going to stick with the Cloverfield monster, because even though it's barely in the movie, that is true, that's definitely fair, I just really love what the movie accomplishes with it, where part of it not being there is just sort of enhancing the fear of New York's under attack, no one knows what's happening, and sometimes you just look over your shoulder and you see what's maybe a wing and you freak the fuck out. That scene you mentioned with like the bite and the explosion, so scary, so upsetting. It's like, it's really scary. It's also really silly again with like, because it's almost kind of bat-like, you know, and it's weird little mixture of stuff. It's just like that nice, fun mix of terrifying and also a little weirdly cute. And as much as Ghidorah is a classic, I personally have fondness for the Cloverfield monster, and I'm going to stick with it.
So I think that makes us split right now if I stick with Cloverfield. Bob, if we go alphabetically for tiebreakers, you're up first. Where are you going to give it?
I'm going to give it to Ghidorah.
Okay. Are we allowed to, are we okay with that, Eric? Can we move forward with this?
Yeah.
All right, great. I do have one word for Clover, which is get some sun, honey. I mean, I'm pale, but that is a white ass monster. So moving on, next 3/4 of the panel is going metal with the iron giant known as Mecha Godzilla. But Eric feels like seafood tonight and is cracking into Destoroyah. Zach, give us the nuts and bolts of your pro Mecha Godzilla campaign machine. Eric, tell us why we're in luck down here, in the muck down here, with Destoroyah and his hot crustacean band. I'll have Eric go first.
So, I will admit that Destoroyah's name is kind of stupid. It's so silly stupid, but I like it. But for me, like I mentioned with Hedorah, I love a monster that like shifts into multiple forms. And with Destoroyah, you get the sort of like hordes of smaller ones that then combine into the bigger one. And it's simple, but it works for me every time. It also is just like a fun example of just sort of that sci-fi trope of like, here's this ancient life form that's back and it's really not meant to be around of humans and it's fucking shit up. I just think it's fun. Yeah, I knew this would be probably the unpopular pick, and Mecha Godzilla is obviously a classic, but I remember seeing Godzilla versus Destoroyah when I was like 5 on a VHS tape, and it just got the chance to imprint on me younger, so it's Destoroyah for me.
Yeah, and we say this all the time on this show, like you cannot discount the power of nostalgia. When something imprints on you at a very young age, it doesn't matter. That is going to have a profound impact on you going forward. See Flash Gordon and all of my sexual kinks. Zach, talk to us about Mecha Godzilla.
All right, so along with Ghidorah, Mecha Godzilla is one of the other big bads that when it shows up on screen, Godzilla is in for an ass kicking. It doesn't matter what version of Mecha G shows up, whether it's from the 70s where we actually saw Godzilla bleed for one of the early parts, which as a kid seeing blood spurt out from a guy from his neck was like, oh my God, that's my hero. Up to the 90s where that Mecha Godzilla actually killed Godzilla in that film, and all the way up through legendary films, where it was, again, using the severed head of Ghidorah that was powering it and controlling it. That's really the only other antagonist that can really give Godzilla a run for his money. And I know in most of the incarnations, it is a robot, but in Legendary, it is linked to that severed head, and also in 2 films, it is Kiryu, which is built from the original from the original bones of the original Godzilla of 1954. So you can argue that even though, all right, well, it's a robot, so it shouldn't count, there is a version of it that is a kaiju at its core that does at times take over and does become a threat to humanity, even though it's supposed to be the savior.
That is fascinating information. And it's kind of like, on the one hand, we have crustaceans with Destoroyah, and we have tuna in a can with Mecha Godzilla, right? So, Bob, where are you on this one?
Yeah, what Zach had said about Kiryu with regards to Mechagodzilla being built on the bones of Godzilla, that was something I was going to bring up and share as well, as a reason as to why I think this is a much cooler version, or cooler kaiju than the other, because I think it's just I think that's a really cool story. I think that's a really cool origin. That's a really cool way to create this Mechagodzilla. And when it comes to Mechagodzilla, he's got all these cool weapons, and he can shoot missiles this and lasers that, and it's just there's just so much that he can do. And he's just a lot of fun, and it's Robot Godzilla. So what's not cool about that?
I'm going to admit something here, folks. When I was filling out the bracket, I thought this was Mecha Streisand from South Park and not Mecha Godzilla. But that being said, I don't regret my decision. So I am going to continue to vote for Mecha Godzilla, who I believe is primarily because of the threat level, right? Like Mecha Godzilla can put the beat down, and offer something a little bit different. I don't know if we have anything else. I mean, Jet Jaguar's out. I don't know if we have any other robots on the list. I guess we'll find out, but, great job, Zach. So I think we will be moving Mecha Godzilla forward, and, in his victory, we will hear him. Yeah, that's loud. Producer Curtis is now deaf. Next, the panel is evenly split between two kaiju arch enemies, Gamera and Iris. Bob explained why Gamera has the turtle power to advance to round 2. I will explain why the eyes have it when it comes to Iris. Bob, do you want me to go first here?
Please do.
Okay. So, I will just first talk a little bit about my rubric with these decisions. A lot of it is based on design. I very much put a lot of my thing on design. I look at threat level, and then I like to find silly things about them because it makes them both cool visually and threatening, but also kind of charming. That's what I like my kaijus cool and charming. So Iris is one of the newer kaiju on this list, having first appeared in 1999. Fun fact, Iris is actually so recent that its look was inspired by a 1995 Magic the Gathering card, which I personally think is very cool. Let's talk about that look, because it's one of the things that I like most about Iris. Iris is all angles and tendrils. It has no mouth, which is fairly rare for a kaiju, and instead of screaming, it emanates more oohs and ahs, which means that Iris would be a great backup singer in any girl group. Iris's front has light up pecs and abs because Iris wants you to know that it has been at the gym and it is putting in the work. Those tentacles make Iris an incredible long distance threat as they stretch nearly 2 kilometers long. This kitten's got a whip, and it also has laser scalpels that fire from its tentacles and can replicate the attacks of its energies, which is pretty badass. Iris's origins are contested. She's a mystery wrapped in an enigma and covered in death. And lastly, based on name alone, Iris could either be a very pretty and delicate flower or a 60-something Midwestern housewife. And I love that for her. So that's my argument for Iris. Bob, you can take it.
Not many people will get this, but Iris, we need more bars.
We need more bars. Yes.
So, yeah. So for me, it's Gamera, and that's who I'm going to talk to you about right now. Gamera is I'm going to show my hand. Gamera is my kaiju. He is the kaiju that I grew up watching and love to this day. I don't know if this will be a controversial or hot take at all. I think that the 90s Heisei era of these films, the 95 through 99, the three films of Iris, Legion, and the Gyaos film are probably 3 of the best kaiju films ever committed to film, taking special effects as well as the practical effects of the man in a suit type of approach, is flawless. And they're darker in tone. They're just really very good movies, just in their own right. They do a lot more with character in that, and as opposed to just people screaming, they actually have characters with motivations and reasons behind why they're doing what they're doing. So I know there are some of that in some of the other films too, but this just does it to such a great level. Gamera came about in 1965. I should probably mention, for those of you who may not know, he is a turtle, a giant turtle tortoise monster. Let's call it what it is. At the time, he was created as a cash grab, as an alternative to Godzilla, by the Daiei Studios, another rival studio. But he quickly gained his own popularity because he is known as the guardian of the universe. At first, he was a kaiju killing and, rampaging, but really, he really started to identify himself as more of a guardian of Earth and a guardian of the universe. He grew into that protector that he is today. Gamera is really a more sympathetic monster than most others, but he has been very much connected with children throughout all of his history. Godzilla has some of that connection as well in some of the films, but he is truly, I will say this, Gamera is for the children, much like Wu-Tang. So he's got great abilities, more so than some others. Fight, spin, shell, fireball, plasma beams. He's a versatile fighter. He does that cool spin as his turtle shell spins and he flies. He's just really cool. He's a great opposite to Godzilla, just an answer to Godzilla. He is probably, in my opinion, probably the second most identifiable kaiju outside of the Godzilla franchises. And I do like Iris quite a bit. I mean, ultimately, it was a movie in which he battled Iris and Iris killed him. And Gamera blew his own arm off in order to defeat Iris. He just took his plasma beam and just severed his own arm off just so he could attack and take care of it. And that's pretty fucking cool. That's badass. And I think Iris is really cool to look at. At the end of the day, I just don't think that Iris gets the job done, or Iris, however they pronounce it in the films. He can only get the job partially done. Which sometimes I can only do that too. But Gamera uses, I just think that Gamera is a more well-known and prominent figure to really go out against one of its own foes here. So that is where I am with Gamera.
I mean, that is the truth. Let's just put that out there. Like, he's definitely the more well-known of the two. Eric, I'm interested for your take here. Where are you, Gamera versus Iris?
I voted for Iris. My personal nostalgia is much more for the Godzilla films than the Gamera films, so Gamera just doesn't really hold as much immediate sway in my mind. Although I will agree with Bob, those 90s movies are good. I watched my way through that trilogy preparing for this. The main thing about Iris that stuck out for me in the movie was that she has this relationship with this young girl who finds her egg and is trying to raise it. And it's just this weird little relationship of this girl trying to raise the monster that she obviously can't control. And I just thought it was neat. Yeah, I don't have a strong argument beyond that. I just think she's cool.
No, I get it. And I think you could make the argument that Godzilla is Transformers as Gamera is to GoBots. And yeah. But Zach, where are you?
This was tough as well because I agree with Bob. Those three movies were incredible. I hadn't seen many of the original Gamera movies. I grew up on mostly Godzilla, but I remember learning about these three in college and went and watched them and went, wow, they made some top-notch kaiju films, not the hokey-tokey 70s and 80s that I grew up on, which was fun when I was a kid. And nostalgia, like you said, is a powerful drug. I liked the creation and idea behind Iris. I did like the originality of it. I did like how you had a connection between the child and Iris, but I did swing more towards Gamera with more familiarity with the character, how he has grown, how he is the defender and guardian of Earth and life. And as you said, Eric is connected to all children. Not just one, is connected to the Earth and the life force. So for me, I still stick with Gamera, although Iris is a incredible foe to face Gamera and almost beat Gamera as well until Gamera said, "No, you can take my hand, and I'll just take the girl out of you with my flame fist." That was a badass moment.
It is a badass moment. So I believe we're currently deadlocked, and I think it would be Eric's choice. Eric, do you want evil to win here and for Iris to go forward over Gamera?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and declare the upset. It's Iris for me.
That's it, everybody. If you're a listener of this podcast, I'm invoking the Amy Pilot rule. I am walking off of this podcast right now. My brisket is busted. We are done. Who invited him? Eric, I'm totally just kidding. Welcome to the podcast.
Exactly.
You're entitled to that wrong opinion by
fine.
100%.
So, in a stunning upset, evil wins because good is dumb. And we will be advancing Iris into round 2. Farewell, Gamera.
Gamera is for the children.
And the children bring about evil, according to Iris. So I feel like this is all really, the circle of life consumes us all. Next, the majority of the panel is giddy for Gigan, but Eric prefers OG Godzilla enemy turned ally, Anguirus. I'm sure I'm completely butchering these names. I'm looking forward to you telling me what I'm doing wrong. Zach, explain why resisting the cyborg Gigan is futile. Eric, walk the dinosaur and try to pick up some votes for Anguirus. I'm going to have Eric go first.
So this one, I don't feel especially strong about. I know Gigan's popular. It was just kind of these are kind of close sort of thing for me. But with Anguirus, I also am not sure how that bundle of vowels is supposed to sound, but I like the sort of dinosaur look, that sort of like ankylosaur, like spiky type of look. I like that as opposed to a bunch of the other ones that are bipedal, he's, what's the word, quadruped, just like stumbling around on all fours. And I think you said he is like the original Godzilla opponent, like the first giant monster that he fought. And I just think he's kind of cute in the Gojibon little like puppet cartoons that they have like on the Godzilla YouTube channel. They have like a bunch of cute little things of like him being friends with Godzilla and all the Godzilla juniors. It's just kind of cute. I like him.
All right. And Zach, talk to us about, is it Gigan?
I've always said Gigan, but
Okay.
I'm also here in America, so I'm probably saying it wrong.
I can't wait for this episode to come out for everybody to just read us for filth over the pronunciation of these names.
These so-called kaiju experts, they can't even say the names. First of all, I love me some space chicken. Gigan is a unique looking MFer. Just, it's a flying chicken with hooks for hands and a buzzsaw in its chest. And it's got an I-beam. Depending on the version that you watch, it may have saw blades as hands. It may have harpoons coming out of them. It's a bit of a cyborg that is always related to aliens in some capacity. And even though Gigan has not shown up nearly as many times as Ghidorah or Mechagodzilla, it is another opponent that has given Godzilla a run for his money. I believe it was the first monster to actually make Godzilla bleed on camera with its buzzsaw and its hooks. And whenever it shows up, outside of Final Wars, which was a fun movie of just Godzilla kicking everybody's ass, Gigan, when it shows up, Godzilla again is going to be in a fight and he's going to get hurt.
Excellent. Bob, where are you on this one?
Eric, I'm over here questioning my life choices and just wondering if it's even worth making a decision in this pairing. I am flames on the side of my face. I'm just kidding. We'll get over it. I'm going with Gigan.
Okay. I actually really enjoyed learning about Anguirus. I didn't know that much about him, frankly, until I started doing this. And I believe, was he he's the first ever villain for Godzilla, right?
Yeah, he's in like the first movie after like the original Solo movie. He's the first monster Godzilla ever fights.
Yeah, and like Godzilla kills him, then he comes back, but he's like his little buddy. And I love that, right? It's like if Kimmy Gibbler was murdered on Full House and then came back as like a friendly zombie. And I think that's great. But I think Gigan, Space Chicken, finger licking good. That's what I have to say about that. So I think I am going to go ahead and push Gigan forward. And I'm so excited for people to listen to this episode and be like, you
ignorant sluts.
Completely butchering the names. I'm excited. Next, it's a battle between two of Godzilla's most notable allies / sparring partners, Mothra and Rodan. Bob, make like Mothra and eat away at my argument. I will explain why a true thinker would vote for Rodan. I will go first because I'm pretty sure I'm outnumbered here, and I'm okay with that. I will just say that I've always loved pterodactyls. They were my favorite dinosaurs growing up, and Rodan is essentially a giant superpowered pterodactyl / pteranodon. And yes, I know those are different things, but let me have this. Rodan was initially created for its own movie, Rodan, which starred a couple of evil Rodan monsters just trying to survive. After that, Rodan came back in the Godzilla films and quickly became one of the more populars of the Godzilla cast of monsters. Rodan has appeared in every iteration of the Godzilla franchise since the 1960s. Now, it's notable that in the 60s / 70s films, his appearance transforms from the scarier, sharper features to more goofy, googly-eyed versions that basically telegraph that Rodan is probably the derpiest of Godzilla and friends, minus Godzilla Jr. Rodan has some somewhat unique skill sets. He can breathe fire, but he also has a massive wingspan that creates thunderclaps that level cities. And that's what I've got. I just like him. I've always liked pterodactyls, but he's up against Mothra, and Mothra is pretty special. So I believe, Bob, you're talking about Mothra?
I am talking about Mothra, and Mothra says, "Keep those mothballs away from my face." But Mothra also was in their own movie as well, similar to Rodan, originally from their own film. Mothra, for me, is one of the, well, both of these, I guess we should probably say, are pretty identifiable in the general pop culture milieu, in the zeitgeist. Everything out there, I think, are pretty identifiable as Godzilla villains or Godzilla monsters, whatever you want to qualify them as. But Mothra, to me, is similar to the argument I made about Jet Jaguar, is really unlike anything else on this bracket. With regards to them, they are this beautiful moth, right? With beautiful colors. Well, beautiful to me, I should say. Maybe not everybody thinks so. But very unique and very interesting looking. From a character design perspective, just very visually striking, really unlike any other kaiju that we're talking about here right now, singular and very unique. They have a number of abilities, powerful wings that will generate these strong gusts of wind. They release silk threads and create protective cocoons. Mothra is very motherly in general as a character. So I think that has it going for it. Often is, as many are, but more so, is often portrayed really as a guardian, as a deity in certain iterations, has a lovely pair of twins that sing as their, I guess, I don't even know what to qualify them as, but they're
the Judds.
They're the Judds, exactly. Yeah. But they're associated with themes of hope and protection, just really connection with the natural world. There's just a depth in mythology to Mothra that I don't think that Rodan really has to the same level. Rodan's a great kind of, creature, great at, in battles and things like that. But Mothra really has a lot more going for them in this pair up. So I'm going to be, that's where I am with Mothra.
All right, Zach, where are you on this one?
So first of all, you reminded me, my sister got me a tiny little Rodan that sits on my desk, and I had to go get it from the other side. And I went, oh, that's right, we're talking about Rodan. I remember the original Rodan movie, and Rodan has shown up as Godzilla's ally, similar to Anguirus here and there. But Bob, I agree with you with Mothra, a bit more versatile, has her own set of movies where she also fought and beat different versions of Ghidorah. She is more recognizable, in my opinion, between the two kaiju, is more unique. So I sway more towards Mothra in that sense, even though I didn't always understand how a giant moth could could beat a fire breathing dragon, but she did it. She did it a couple times.
Like all good mothers, she has something up her sleeve.
Sister was doing it for herself.
She was.
So.
She was. Yeah. Eric, where are you on this one?
This is a painful one because I love Rodan, and I encourage anyone who's never watched the original film to watch it because it's excellent. However, Mothra is the pepperoni argument. She's not gonna not pass round one. It's Mothra all day, every day, but I love Rodan.
I am so pleased that you took the pepperoni argument. Excellent work. Well done, sir. I'll just put this out there. As I was doing prep for this episode, I'm watching YouTube videos of Rodan, and my partner's like, who the fuck is that? And I was like, it's Rodan. He's like, I don't know her. It was very Mariah Carey towards Jennifer Lopez energy. Whereas like Mothra, he knows, but he didn't know Rodan. So I think Mothra has to take it here. I think it's correct. And, in honor of Mothra's victory, let's hear her. Voice of an angel, that one. Finally, in round one, the majority of the panel is going ape over that other kaiju pillar, King Kong, but Eric is ordering the vegan option and prefers Biollante. Bob, explain why we need to keep our hands on that damn dirty ape, Kong. Eric, explain why a rose by any other name wouldn't be as terrifying as Biollante, and I'm going to have Eric go first.
So with Biollante, you get not just a different type of animal, but like a different type of kingdom. It's a plant, it's a plant. Yeah. And that's different from the rest of the bracket. It also has that weird sort of hybrid shit going on where it's like part plant, part Godzilla. What's going on? It's really weird and kind of a mess, but I just like it. And I mostly was voting against King Kong because King Kong is too scary for me, which is maybe why I should be voting for it, but I can't because that gorilla freaks me the fuck out. So I'm voting for Biollante.
I am fascinated to get more into this, that like Godzilla is fine, but King Kong is scarier. And I suspect we will be getting to that in round two. But first, let's hear Bob's argument for King Kong.
So, surprise everyone. Maybe should have talked about this before we started this podcast, but I'm actually not leaning so much towards King Kong anymore. So I might need somebody else to take the argument, but I was doing some research for this, and Biollante is really cool from an origin story. Born from the cells of Godzilla, a rose, as well as the spliced cells of the dead daughter of the doctor who created him. It's just a really cool story behind that one.
That's how they make Cal, though, Bob. It's not actually that special.
Here's the thing with King Kong. He is a classic, right? He is absolutely one of the things that you think about when you think of big monster movies, the classics. He comes back again and again. His films continue to continue to come out. He's in the newest versions of the MonsterVerse with Godzilla, Godzilla versus Kong, Skull Island, all of the different movies. He just comes back and again, just as Godzilla does. I don't know as though Biollante has the same, cultural cachet as somebody like King Kong. So I think, yeah, exactly. So, from a total picture of which do I think is just the cooler monster? I do kind of think the Biollante is the cooler monster with the cooler story, but I don't see that putting them above King Kong in this scenario, knowing how iconic, how important to just these franchises in general King Kong is, really identifying that in some way. I think that he's a little different from some other kaiju because he just is a giant gorilla. He's not, quote unquote, a strange beast in and of himself. He's just a large gorilla. There's nothing kind of aside from that, there's nothing unique or different about him, but just being able to be a representative of these films in general and just being the icon that he is, that's where I am putting him ahead of Biollante. But it was touch or go there for a few minutes as I was preparing for this, just learning so much about Biollante, because I'd never seen this film. I believe it has only ever been in one film. Is that right, Eric?
Yeah, it's like one film, and it's like super hard to find. Like, it's not available to stream anywhere. Blu-rays run for like $100. It's like not accessible.
And it's a newer of the
VHS.
Oops, sorry, go ahead, Zach.
I was going to say I should see what my VHS is worth. I have most of these on VHS back in the 90s.
So do I.
Bought them all.
Yeah, I have bootlegs of the Gamera films, but we don't talk about Gamera in this podcast anymore. So
I love the salt. Biollante would taste great with a little bit of salt, sauteed with some butter. Zach, where are you on this one?
So I still lean more towards King Kong because just a familiarity with it, how many films there have been, a lot of different versions of King Kong. Biollante, in her own movie, was not in it very much. And as interesting as an origin as it is for her creation and what she is made of, and she is mentioned again in the Space Godzilla film because she's kind of related there. There's not enough of her for me to vote for her. If she showed up in maybe another film and was able to play a bigger part, I would probably have gone for her because I do find her an interesting character and I wanted more. I just never got more. So unfortunately, that's why I stuck with King Kong.
Yeah, I also, doing the research, I was like, that's cool. A plant-based creature that's also kind of, part of a dead... It actually sounds like a Final Fantasy VII character, to be honest with you. But it's up against King Kong, and King Kong is like it's Legendary Pictures that do the film. King Kong is literally legendary. Like, there is no one else in this bracket that comes close to the history. Not even Godzilla that comes close to the history of King Kong. And so for me, it has to be Kong here, even though Biollante is super cool. So I have Zach and I are firmly on Kong. Eric's Biollante. Bob, are you sticking with Kong or are you switching your vote?
I'll stick with Kong.
Okay. So that's 3 for Kong. It will be moving on to round 2. That is the end of round 1. We're going to take a quick break, during which one of our panelists will take on a terrifying new form. We will be right back.
Hey, Squirrel friends! Curtis here from the Great Pop Culture Debate. We hope you're enjoying this episode of the podcast. But did you know, much like RuPaul's Drag Race, if you're not a Patreon supporter, honey, you're only getting half the story. Our patrons at the $5 level gain access to exclusive content for each episode, where the debaters go from the top 32 competitors down to the Sweet 16. It's like a whole bonus episode for each topic. So if you love our content and want more of it, head to patreon.com/greatpopculturedebate and become a Patreon supporter today.
We're back for round 2 of our best kaiju debate. Before we get to the Elite 8, I want our panelists to share their social media, talk about their other projects, and also share their first exposure to the kaiju genre. Bob, you go first.
Okay, you can find me at DisnerdBob at all of the things, Twitter, Instagram, Mastodon. Probably if you search for me using that handle, you'll probably find me. I'm not all that interesting, but go ahead and find me and we'll talk. Just be nice. But anyway, for me, the exposure to kaiju and just the genre in general is from Gamera. But really how I became very interested in it was through Mystery Science Theater 3000, because they used to watch all of the Gamera films. And yes, they are picking on them in those, but there's also a reverence for them a little bit as well, appreciating them for what they are, but really just blasting them and just picking on them, making fun of them to the nth degree. And that's how I became familiar with Gamera in the first place, and that in turn led me to seek out Gamera in other places and really start to appreciate the Godzilla films and other kaiju films and kaiju of the like and things like that. So that's really how I got into the genre, and I was probably 10, 11, 12 when that was happening. So it was a long time ago because I'm old AF. As we talked about, I'm ancient and pissed, and my personality is radioactive.
It's
so
true.
There we have
it's
it.
true. Eric, please tell us your socials. Please tell us what other projects you're working on, and also how you became acquainted with kaiju.
So I don't have a definite like first memory that I know was for sure like the first movie, but my dad loved Godzilla, so it was just from my dad exposing me to Godzilla growing up. In terms of socials, I'm on Twitter until that burns down completely at Zorak Richardson. That's Zorak as in the mantis that's always pissing off Space Ghost, and then Richardson. And I have a podcast, Chris and Eric's Longbox Adventure. It's just me and my co-host Chris talking about comic books, being nerds, as if it wasn't already clear.
We love all of those things. No, we love that. And a huge Space Ghost fan here, Space Ghost Coast to Coast especially. I just read that they're removing it from HBO Max, which I'm very bummed about because that's a loss. But thank you so much. And again, thank you for sponsoring this episode very much. Zach, please share your socials, your other projects, and your first encounter with a kaiju.
So you can follow me primarily just through Twitter at Zach Deuce. There I update people with the different projects and podcasts that I'm a part of. The main one that we're focusing on now with Podcasters Assemble. It is a I love the 80s or 90s style episodes, and we work our way through a franchise talking about the movies that we love or hate. We've done Star Wars, we've done Mortal Kombat, we have done Godzilla, King Kong before, and we are currently going through Indiana Jones, counting down to the Dial of Destiny. So you can check that out through probablywork.com under Podcasters Assemble, where all lovely podcasters can submit their own audio if they are so inclined to talk about Indiana Jones.
And the Great Pop Culture Debate will actually be doing that. So look for our thoughts.
Very excited to hear it.
We will be defending the Crystal Skull because nobody else will. So
I will gladly be defending the Crystal Skull. But anyway,
I
like
think
it.
I'll watch it. I mean, I will defend parts of it, and then I'll probably just shit on it because that's part of the fun.
Absolutely.
My first exposure that I can remember to the kaiju world was Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, and it was me in the VHS rental store in a town over from where I was, because our rental store apparently sucked, and this rental store next town had a bigger selection. And I just remember seeing these 3 or 4 monsters on the cover fighting this giant three-headed monster, going, "Wow, I think that's Godzilla." And I had a Godzilla toy, and I had knowledge of Godzilla, but I had never seen the movie. And lo and behold, it was Godzilla, even though it didn't say this version was Godzilla. And that was really my first exposure that I can remember watching a kaiju film. And from there, I found out that my mother was a big Godzilla fan as well. So my entire childhood is me watching all these movies with my mother because my dad didn't care about them. But I had a lot of bonding with my mom over kaiju.
I love that. Godzilla is bringing families together.
Yep.
You know what? Yeah.
Zach, what's a VHS?
Oh, please. Oh, please, Mary.
It's a former way that we used to watch the TV, kids. And if you know the phrase, be kind, please rewind, you're old as fuck.
That's right. You should probably be getting your colonoscopy booked right now. So thank you, Zach.
Thank you.
And we are delighted to have you back on the podcast. Come back anytime. So for me, you can find me at Eric Resniak. That's EricRezsnyak on Twitter and Instagram, or just message the at Great Pop Culture Debate account on Instagram or at GPCD on Mastodon. We are trying to shift over there as our primary social platform, but honestly, it's hard to quit the others. Now, for me, I distinctly remember watching Godzilla films as a kid. I loved the ones where all the monsters monsters would team up to fight another monster. I always thought that was really cool. And then I don't know if this really counts as kaiju, and I'd be curious for people's thoughts on it, but I loved Voltron in the 80s. And to me, I kind of consider that to be like a gateway drug to kaiju, because you had the giant roe beasts and the robot lions turning into the giant robot with the sword. So that was the other kind of way. That was certainly my gateway into anime, which I think those two things have a lot of overlap. So with that being said, let's move into round 2, when the enemy kaiju attacks are even more devastating. First up, it's Godzilla versus Hedorah. And I've been informed during our break that it's not Hedorah, it's not Hedorah, it's Hedorah. So we're going to go around the horn here. I'm going to start with Bob. Where are you on this one?
I'm with Godzilla.
Okay. Eric?
Easily the hardest one so far. It's like, with Godzilla, it's the ultimate pepperoni argument of it's fucking Godzilla. But I love Hedorah, and it's kind of like, do I go with the one who is the legendary icon, is like the face of the genre? But the thing about that is because he's been around so long, there are a couple bad Godzilla movies, versus Hedorah's just got the one, and it's so fierce, and I rewatched it last night, and I love it, you know? It's like, do I go with the one and done, or with, like, the icon? And I know he's not gonna win, but I'm gonna vote for Hedorah, because I just love Hedorah, and I'll just rep him before he gets utterly destroyed in this vote.
I love that bravery, and I love you standing up for what you really believe in. Zach, where are you on this?
I love the defense. Godzilla has had some bad movies. Hedorah has only had the one. Because that movie does not hold up to my childhood when I rewatch it. I wonder, why did I like this? And it is a fun movie, but it's definitely one of the bad ones. I still go with Godzilla. I would have liked to see more Hedorah, especially, I think he was in Final Wars for like a brief second where he got taken out by Godzilla, and when he threw Ibra into him, I think that was his cameo in the film. But I'm sticking with Godzilla. He's been a hero. He's been an enemy. He can fill all facets, whatever we need him to be.
Godzilla is whatever you need him to be. I love that. He's the room of requirement of kaiju. Bob, you have something to say?
Would our votes change if this was against Godzilla 98?
Well, I don't know her. I don't recognize that. I'm sure we will talk about Godzilla 98 in the next rounds. But Eric, your argument kind of made me say, okay, in drag race parlance, and I'm sorry, Zach, I'll just apologize to you right now, but this would be like, do you vote for RuPaul, who's like the classic, the icon, who's had some lousy seasons, versus Brooklyn Heights, who's only had a few seasons, but they've been pretty good? So I still go with the RuPaul, and Godzilla is the RuPaul of kaiju. All legs, all dairy, all legendary. All right, so that's 3 for Godzilla, 1 for Hedorah. Next up, it's Ghidorah versus Mechagodzilla. I'm going to start backwards. Zach, where are you on this one?
This is really tough. Both of them, like I stated before, can give Godzilla a run for his money. And I had Mechagodzilla continuing on, and I think the only reason was because Ghidorah has not been able to finish the job. Came close multiple times, but usually another monster or the humans intervene, could not kill Godzilla, whereas Mechagodzilla did in the 90s version, and then Godzilla was resurrected and brought back by Rodan. But for me, I strayed more towards Mechagodzilla, but I won't be sad if Mechagodzilla loses to Ghidorah, because that, in my opinion, is an okay kaiju to lose to.
Sure, yeah. Eric, where are you on this one?
Ghidorah, like, it's just the really cool three-headed blah. It's just the three-headed dragon, you know. She looks fierce. She's cool. Mechagodzilla, like, I would absolutely count as like a kaiju more than I would like Jet Jaguar. But my personal preferences, I think I lean more towards ones that are like, that look sort of like a natural life form as opposed to cybernetic sort of thing. So the dragon of it all just wins out for me.
Okay. Bob, where are you on this one?
Gosh, really, this is probably my hardest pairing because I think that both of these are really equally cool characters, equally cool kaiju. Where I think I might, and I think maybe I'm aligning with Eric with regards to this thought process, is where I'm going to be leaning towards with Ghidorah is I think character design first and foremost. The three-headed dragon is phenomenal. It is so fun to look at. Both of these pop up time and time again in movies together separately, but they are consistent foes or consistent partners throughout these films. God, it would be cool to have a Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla in the next round. But at the end of the day, I think Ghidorah is cooler. Ghidorah is truly the kaiju. Mechagodzilla is created, and is not, a natural form of kaiju. So I think for those reasons, it's just really tough for me because I love them both so much. But I think Ghidorah, drag me, folks, for pronouncing this wrong. But, I think I'm going to be going with Ghidorah. I've said it like 3 different ways just then.
Well, 3 different heads, 3 different pronunciations, I think
true.
That's fitting. It's fitting.
I dated a guy with, never mind.
I think I'm going with Ghidorah here because how's your head? He has 3 different answers, but all of them are no complaints. So I think that is my answer. I think that Ghidorah is just badass. That design is really cool. I agree that like Mechagodzilla is like the Ferrero Rocher of Godzilla villains, where he's got the gooey insides and the crispy outsides. But I have to give it to Ghidorah here. I think he's a cooler design, which gives us a hell of a Final Four matchup next round. Next, it's Erie, I don't know, versus Gigan. I'm going to start in the middle of the lineup with Eric. Where are you on this one?
So I'm voting for Iris. I'll die on this unpopular hill. Just, feelings are tied to the movies themselves and just how poignant her storyline was with the child that found her, and their weird, like, unhealthy symbiosis was just really interesting. Whereas with Gigan, I never felt like any of the plots were particularly interesting. Like, I didn't really feel like I knew it as like a character particularly unique, like thematically or motivation wise. Like, I just kind of look at it and I go, what the hell is that? So I'm voting for Iris.
Okay. Zach, where are you on this one?
Oh boy, this is tough because I didn't have Iris going against Gigan, and I love me some space.
Neither did I.
So poor Bob, I feel bad. They're both interesting. I think Iris does have the better storyline compared to Gigan. Gigan has appeared a few more times over a few different movies with Godzilla. I think I will actually go with Iris for this one, just based upon wanting more from Gigan. If I had more of a storyline based around Gigan other than just, well, the aliens have created a cyborg and sent it against Earth, I think I would stick with Gigan. But I agree with Eric in his approach to Iris, that she is a more interesting character.
All right, Bob, this is tough, not only because Gamera's not in here, but the creature that killed Gamera is now up for your decision. What are you going to do?
Well, let's be clear that Iris didn't kill Gamera. Can we be clear about that?
Let's be
Thank
clear
you.
about that.
So, I'm actually going to be voting for Iris in this matchup. It does come down to character design in this for me. I didn't really go in depth in the previous round because I was fighting for Gamera to my death in the previous round. But Iris is so incredibly cool to look at. Just this tall. I don't even know it. I don't even know how to explain like what it would look like in general. But it's got this really cool breastplate with glowing panels on it. The tentacles, very Doc Ock style, of just, you know, all over the place, just flailing in the wind, can go to great distances, can go over vast space, and not just, you know, not just where he is standing. He can attack in various areas around them. It's just very cool. There is a theory behind the origin that it is an evolution of Gyaos from the previous films. In that third film, Gyaos is very present in that as well. They are springing up all around the world. So it is theorized that it is an evolution of Gyaos in that film. So I think that's a pretty cool story. And I just love that it's not just a monster that is there to try to defeat Gamera. It is a young girl who creates this bond with the character, who hates Gamera for killing her, what she perceived to be Gamera killing her family in a previous film. I believe it was from the Gyaos film. I don't think it was from the Legion film, but in which her family was in a home and it collapsed on them and they died. And so she blamed Gamera all of this time until she realizes in the end that Gamera is for the children. But, you know, Gamera's not here for me to vote for right now. So I'm going to vote for Iris.
I am getting my daily recommended value of sodium from you in this episode, and I'm grateful for that. So thanks for the electrolytes. I give it to Iris, so that's a clean sweep. We were talking about how you described the look of Iris. Another kind of comic book inspiration that I keep resonating with this is Onslaught from the Marvel Universe. There's elements of it that looks like Onslaught to me, which would have been slightly after that happened in the comics. I just think it's a cool look. And, Gigant's got a really great 1960s sci-fi type of vibe to it. There's something about it it's camp, but in a way that I find very charming. But Iris is the cooler option, I think. So I'm going to give it to that. And that way you still have some Gamera representation in the final four, even if it's not actual Gamera, he's gone. He's Afterlife Kids.
Let's move on. Thank you.
Finally, it's Mothra versus King Kong. This is a tough one. I'm going to start with Bob. Where are you on this?
I have to give this one to Mothra. I do think King Kong is obviously very iconic, very integral and important to the genre, to the movies in cinema, just in general, in the world. It kind of transcends just being a monster film because it is so popular in the mainstream as well. But I have to give it to Mothra from the perspective of it is a true part of just this kaiju genre. I think it fits more with the strange beast kaiju definition, so to speak. It is, again, Mothra is incredibly visually stunning to look at, a protector, in numerous movies, the Godzilla, the Mothra films, it outnumbers several other of these creatures, including Rodan, from the number of films that they are in. It still comes back in the current films, in the MonsterVerse films, etc., along with Kong being there also. But in my mind, and maybe this is an unpopular thought or unpopular opinion, like King Kong doesn't stick out to me as kaiju, as part of this kaiju universe, as well as some of these other monsters that you truly identify in these, from the different eras of kaiju films. I'm trying to think of the best way I'm trying to describe that. It just doesn't really, King Kong doesn't really fit in the same way as some of these other creatures. And I think that may or may not make sense to you, the listener, or to you, the panel, but that's really where my mind is King Kong just doesn't fit for me.
I think what you're trying to say, as the Black Eyed Peas would put it, everything else is so 2008 and King Kong is so 2000 late, right?
Maybe. That could be.
Yeah. Eric, where are you on this?
It's Mothra. It's still the pepperoni argument, which I realize sounds crazy because King Kong is so famous, obviously. But here's the thing. I don't like primates. I don't like apes. It's fucking freaky. It is, in fact, a scary-ass kaiju. He freaks me out. But Mothra is Mothra. The thing about Mothra that some of the other creatures on the bracket don't have is Mothra doesn't just bring herself, she brings an entire supporting cast and lore. Like, there's always those two inexplicably teeny little women always just hanging out, singing. You get a musical number in a movie with Mothra in it. There's always that going on. There's just the weirdness with the island. There's the constant resurrection. She has a cute little larval form. There's just so much to love. It's Mothra.
It's Mothra. Zach, where are you?
I agree. It's Mothra. She's just more versatile. She's a more interesting character. King Kong's been around. He's one of the original, but my vote is for Mothra. I can't really touch on anything else that you guys have already not touched on.
I think the argument that ultimately swayed me was actually the one that Bob made while defending King Kong in round one, which is that King Kong doesn't actually there's not strange beast to King Kong, right? He's just a very large version of an actual animal, and none of the rest of these are. They all have some type of supernatural ability or something that's just like, okay, this is wild that this creature can do that. And King Kong's just a really big monkey, and I can see how that's terrifying for people. And I do enjoy watching him and Godzilla beat the crap out of each other on the big screen. That's very satisfying. But in terms of what's more interesting and more special, I do think it goes to Mothra here. So even though I don't think this is what my bracket had, I am going to move Mothra forward into the final four. With that, we have our final four. We're going to take a quick break to check in on the tiny monster summoning fairies that we've been keeping inside this airtight container. And We'll be right back after these messages. Back with the final four of our best kaiju debate. At this point in the show, I always like to take a step back and see if the final four matches up with what I figured. I don't think it does. I think Iris being there is a surprise to many people as I look directly at Bob and his glare of death. But that being said, I think these are great. Iris does give us some Gamera representation. Mothra and Godzilla are classics that I think deserve to be there, and Ghidorah is a great lethal threat, right? Like, these are really good, to use a term, titans that make sense. And so I think it's a great grouping. Eric, as our sponsor, are you pleased with that final four?
Oh, yeah. I am so proud of myself.
You're not getting your money back.
I am so proud of getting Iris in the final four. You have no idea.
Good. So that being said, let's jump into these. It's Godzilla versus Ghidorah. I'm going to start with Eric. Where are you on this one?
It's Godzilla. Like, Ghidorah, we've all said, the design is great, but so is Godzilla. And he's just the one, you know, he is the head bitch of this genre. You know, like, every aspect of it, the design, iconic, the several designs, because the thing about being the number one is just all the reinvention, and like Madonna, being beloved in every single version that he ever delivers. And just thematically, you know, like that original Godzilla movie and just the atomic bomb inspiration, there's a reason he struck a chord and continues to strike a chord. God knows how many years it's been since, so it's Godzilla for me.
Do we think that the 1990s Godzilla film is the Evita of the Godzilla universe? Is that what we're saying here? All right, so Zach, where are you on this?
I'm going with Godzilla. Ghidorah is a strong counter to Godzilla, but there's a reason why Godzilla is king of the monsters.
King of the Monsters. Bob, where are you on this one?
Yeah, I'm going to be going with Godzilla as well. I think Eric just struck on something really important to with Godzilla is really, there's a reason behind him. There's a purpose for him. I don't, remind me if I am mistaken, but I don't know as though there's that real same kind of reason or purpose behind King Ghidorah or Ghidorah, however you want to pronounce it. Again, I can't pronounce it the same way twice. But really the atomic bomb, I think we already got rid of Hydra, which, had the pollution element behind them as a kaiju as well. But I think from a messaging perspective and just representing and a commentary, I think Godzilla has that edge in this pairing, as well as, to Zach's point, he is the king of the monsters. The movies told me so. It says right on the title of that poster, King of the Monsters. So, duh.
And movies have never lied to me. And despite the fact that Ghidorah is also a king, but it's Godzilla here. It has to be Godzilla here. So that's Godzilla advancing to final two. Iris versus Mothra. I want to start with Bob. Where are you on this one?
I want Gamera, please.
Okay.
Oh, is that an option? Oh, I'm so
Not
sorry.
an option.
So it's Iris versus, I'm sorry, who did we pick for the
Mothra?
Golly. I am going to have to go with Mothra. I think we've talked a lot about both of these characters, but I think in this pairing specifically, just the overall content of Mothra that is out there, the number of times that she's been in a film, her own films, the Godzilla films, the reinvention of her throughout time. Iris has the one film. Again, Eric, let that sink in. That's just one film that Iris is in. But anyway, so I'm going to be going with Mothra in this pairing.
Zach, where are you on this one?
I'm going to agree with Bob. I like Iris as a character. I wish we had more. I really wish that trilogy expanded and we went further, because that trilogy ends on a cliffhanger with a oh shit feeling to it. And I wish that we had more, but it was a clever design, and it told a great three stories. But I'm going to go with Mothra as well. If there was more Iris, I may have swung the other way, but I'm going to go with Mothra.
Eric, where are you?
It's Mothra. As funny as the Iris of it all has been, it's Mothra. It's Iris's time to go.
Hysterical.
I agree.
Points.
I love how bothered you are. You are panini pressed. All right, so it's a final two of Godzilla versus Mothra. Kaiju mommy and daddy are fighting, and now we have to pick. I'm going to start with Zach. Where are you on this one?
Oh, this is tough. Mothra, she is much like Gamera was, there as a defender of life, always on the side of good. Even though people may die by accident, she was never malicious with it. I think I will go with Godzilla because some of the early films are goofy. Some of them are bad, but he can play a different character. Even though it's a man in a suit or CGI, whether it's the simple thing of don't fuck with atomic weapons, or these are the thousands of dead souls that were taken out, by the atomic bomb, or he is a Titan defending Earth as well. He can be good. He can be bad. He can be versatile depending on what the movie needs him to be. Mothra will always be good. She will never be anything other than that. There's nothing wrong with that, and I love her design, but I'll go with Godzilla just because of the longevity and versatility that he has been used as a character.
All right, Bob, where are you on this one?
I love the layers that Mothra brings into these films, that these can be more than just, a monster stomping around the city and destroying buildings, right? Insurance companies are going, wild over this, but I think Mothra brings in something that this can be. It can be more than just a monster. It can offer more. It can mean more. It can be a protector. It can be the mother to other things. But at the end of the day, when you think about kaiju monster films in general, and I attribute this to some of the oh shit moments that I saw in Pacific Rim, where it was just, you're just waiting for those monsters to get to the landscape, to get to the scene where they're fighting and stomping and just attacking one another. And Mothra is around and she's engaged in some of that, but it's really Godzilla stomping around, being a monster, whether it's good or bad. Destroying is what you want to see in these films. At least maybe I'm speaking for myself in that regard, but just from an overall thought process of kaiju films and monster films in general, I think that Godzilla, in addition to everything else we've already said about him, just encapsulates the genre, and is the king of all monsters.
Eric.
Painful. This is painful. Because the thing is, any other matchup, it would be like, Mothra, done. That's it. But it's Godzilla. And I think I just have to go with Godzilla, as much as I hate to say no to Mothra. It's Godzilla.
I mean, these were both your pepperoni arguments, right? So this is what happens when pepperoni meets pepperoni. This is what happens when Doug does cry, right?
Which one is the spicy cup pepperoni, though?
That's the question. I think the answer is Godzilla, is the spicy cup pepperoni.
So spicy.
So spicy. I do think that some people would be like, duh. And you could absolutely say, duh. However, if we were looking just on primacy, technically King Kong would be the winner, because King Kong predates all of them by, I want to say, 20 years on Godzilla. Godzilla was 50s, Kong was 30s. Yeah. But I think that Godzilla I really liked what Zach said about the range. He's like the Robert De Niro of kaijus. There's a lot of range there. He can do comedy. He can do Meet the Fockers. He can do serious. He can do The Godfather. But he's always satisfying. Even a bad Godzilla movie is still satisfying. Mothra is wonderful. She's a strong, independent woman looking out for her children. But Godzilla brings it home. And like you said, Bob, like, what am I watching these movies for? It is that moment where like giant things are punching each other. Mothra doesn't punch anyone. Mothra like flaps its wings and like does iridescence and shoots silly string at people, and that's all great. But like Godzilla beats the shit out of people and like rips off their heads and like breathes atomic fires, and like that's what I want out of my kaiju movies. So I think it has to be Godzilla, and yes, it's duh, but it's also warranted to be duh, in my opinion. So there you have it, folks. Our pick for the best kaiju is in fact Godzilla. Do you agree? Do you think that we need to redo this kaiju big battle? Tell us how you really feel by leaving a comment on this episode at greatpopculturedebate.com, or find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or Mastodon. While you're there, make sure you subscribe and follow the podcast so you can hear about what new debates are coming soon, vote in open polls, and even decide which topics we tackle next. If you really enjoyed this episode, please take a minute to like and rate the episode of the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or whatever platform you listen on. I want to say thank you to my panel. Thank you especially to Eric for sponsoring this episode. It was a lot of fun. We combined our monster powers and saved the world from destruction once again. And thank you all for listening. If you loved what you heard, please consider supporting us on Patreon, where you can get even more exclusive content and you get episodes a whole day early. We hope you have a good one. And remember, everyone is entitled to their wrong opinion.
Justice for Gamera.